everyone for another riveting FNPS meeting. We have a wonderful speaker who's a very good friend of mine. So hopefully you guys are going to get a whole lot of value from tonight's meeting. I'd like to welcome our new members. So I will post their names up on the slideshow, and thank you all for your contribution. Each one of you that joins helps us just a little bit more be able to do some of the cool things that we are doing and planning on doing, which I will get into a little bit later with our conservation group. We're planning some cool stuff for that. So if you guys have not attended one of our meetings before, we're going to be starting up our conservation meetings again monthly. Those are going to start on the 14th of this month. 6:30 to 7 o'clock, 7:30-ish. We've got a lot of cool stuff planned. Right now, we're working on a project with, we're calling the Pinellas Urban Wildlife Corridors Project. We've got a lot of cool things in the works, a lot of connections that we're making with this sort of startup program. And we're hoping that we can kind of jumpstart it, get it going, and hopefully see this project evolve throughout the years. Hopefully we're going to see this as a long-term project. So very cool. If you guys are interested, please drop by that meeting. That'll be on the 14th. We have another volunteer opportunity at Forest Bluff Park. We're doing we're going to be part of a nature tree and shrub planting. You can join us at 10 o'clock. Along with a whole bunch of groups. We're going to be out there with Keep Pinellas Beautiful, City of St. Pete Parks and Rec, Urban Forestry Committee, Office of Sustainability, Ideas for Us, Greater Pinellas Point Civic Association, and us. We're going to be out there. We're going to try and enhance the natural diversity of the park, and also the main goal is to assist in improving the water quality that this area contributes to Tampa Bay. So super important. We're working with Tree Inc. again, William Moriarty, a lot of very important, very cool programs that they've brought to the area. So if you're looking to be a part of something, this is a good thing to be a part of. Again, we have our monthly Moccasin Lake garden opportunity. That seemingly a month ago, actually 4 months ago, project that we did. We tore out some non-native firebush. We did a little garden planting, as well as added some kind of unique native plants around the garden. So this month, we're going to sort of revisit that planting, as well as do a couple of other things. We're going to be mulching that bed in its entirety. There were a few bare spots, so we're going to just set that up to thrive. But it's summertime, and we've got a lot of different summer bloomers, coneflowers, Stokes asters. We've got stuff that blooms all year that are in that garden as well. But we're going to focus on why mulch is good, why you want to do it, especially in the summertime. But we're also going to do a walkthrough for some of those unique plants that we just installed. And we're also going to talk about kind of what's blooming in the garden. We're going to talk about some of those summer bloomers as well. So it'll be a great learning opportunity, good hands-on opportunity for anyone to come out and join us that day. I will be there as well. So if you like me, I'll be talking more. So, if you will not be there, there is another great thing. Maybe you'll be at this instead on June 18th. We're going to be a part of another pine tree planting. We had a phase 1 of this project, I believe a month or two ago, at Fort DeSoto Park. And we're going to be doing another one, part of another one. This is put on by the Suncoast Sierra Club and Keep Pinellas Beautiful. Their goal is to plant about 100 new trees in this area of Fort DeSoto. I did want to mention before we get out of here that we do have our field trip, our monthly field trip this weekend on Saturday. This is, we're going to have a bird walk with the Clearwater Audubon Society at Largo Central Park. So obviously it's a bird walk. We're going to walk around, look at birds. So bring your binoculars, again, sunscreen, water, all that fun stuff. So information is again in our newsletter on our website. We're going to start at around 8:30. So if you are going to be there, be there. And you can go sign up before the meeting or before that field trip online. Make sure that everyone's checked in and good to go. I would like to introduce Amanda Streets with Living Roots Eco Design and Garden Shop. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So Amanda is a lifelong gardener and a nature enthusiast. She is a Florida-friendly landscape certified professional and permaculture designer. She's the owner of Living Roots Eco Design and Garden Shop. And through her work, she helps people learn to take care of the earth in more eco-friendly ways. She enjoys cooking, spending time outdoors with her son, and traveling. So today she's going to be talking about gardening for songbirds. And this presentation will guide you to create a garden to attract and support diverse songbirds so that you can enjoy their beauty and their benefits to your space while aiding in the survival, in their survival in the face of increasing urbanization and habitat loss. So with that, I will turn over the share screen to you, Amanda, and I will let you take it away.
My name is Amanda, and my plant nursery we just moved. We were formerly at the Hive in St. Pete, and we just moved to 38th Avenue North into the former Carroll's nursery. So we went from this cute little space at like an art studio to this huge nursery, and we sell native plants and fruit trees and veggies and help customers with their questions and whatnot. So songbirds are something that I love. They sound beautiful, they look beautiful, but beyond being pretty and sounding pretty, they have a lot of benefits in our gardens at home, whether it's they're eating pests like caterpillars on your vegetable plants or caterpillars in your oak trees. This year, I feel like my oak trees were completely engulfed in those little caterpillars. Or they're aerating the soil or helping pollinate. Birds have a lot of different jobs in nature, and sometimes they're overlooked. So thought we could talk a little bit about that tonight, and then how to attract them to your space. So why is your space so important for birds or other wildlife? Basically, the land east of the Mississippi, which is roughly this red line here, where we live, is 85% privately owned. What does that mean? It means that it's not nature preserves and national forests and parks that are owned publicly. It's privately owned land that people have for their yards or their farms or corporate owned or whatever. And we don't have a whole lot of control with a lot of the land use, but we do have control over our own land use, how you use your space, whether you have a giant property, hundreds of acres, or you just have, a little postcard size plot, or even just a patio. So how can you make a difference, a splash, an impact with your space? And why? So the Pinellas Wildlife Corridor project that you were talking about, or whatever it was called, sorry if I got that name a little mixed up, is important because this is Florida, right? This is the map of Florida, and we can see here there's green and there's purple. Well, the green is areas that are wildlife corridor. The purple is areas that are super urbanized. Well, here we are, super urbanized. And yet we're completely surrounded by water. Pinellas County is this peninsula with all of this vibrant potential for wildlife, whether it's songbirds or water birds or other animals that live here naturally before, it was highly urbanized. All of that thrived. Well, we need to create spaces so those animals can continue to exist here, because they are here. And if we provide a space for them to go in between yards, they can still live and thrive alongside of us, and we can enjoy their beauty, and they can be helpers in the ecosystem. So I kind of think of it as like a connect the dots. How can we help these critters to be able to go from yard to yard, tree to tree, preferred nesting ground to preferred nesting ground, and places where they can forage and find food and live within, you know, a decent amount of range for them to travel and go about their business. So basically, the birds need the same things that most people need. They need shelter, they need a space to live and to raise their young. They need food, water, of course, and then they need clean air and a clean environment. A lot of animals in general are sensitive to toxins, insects and amphibians in particular, or animals that creep and crawl along the ground. And then in turn, the next level up, those animals that eat those little animals. So birds eat insects, they eat mosquitoes, they eat lizards, they eat small animals, they eat weed seeds, like Biden seeds, for example. And what are we trying to get rid of? Mosquitoes and weeds and all of these you know, big problems. Well, then our birds are in turn ingesting that, or they're bathing and drinking water that's been polluted with chemicals and fertilizers and oil and gas and all of the stuff that runs off from the street. So how can we make a big impact is, well, really reducing our use of those pollutants and trying to kind of just embrace our ecosystem and our part in the ecosystem. If you've seen one of my presentations before, you've probably seen this graphic that I share a lot. It's a poster done by an artist named Molly Danielson. And I really like it because it shows the interconnectedness between the ecosystem that we're familiar with above ground, the birds and the trees and the flowers and the bigger animals and whatnot. But it also shows the interconnectedness between that, the stuff below ground, the roots, the fungi, the earthworms, and all of the stuff that's happening under the surface of the soil, including the water being filtered in the soil and taken up by the trees. It's this whole system that supports life. And our birds are one of the animals that are using this as a food source. They're, you know, scratching at the soil. They're eating bugs. They're eating millipedes and worms and ants and all this stuff that's in the soil and lives in the soil and aerates the soil. And it all works together to make our soil healthy, to keep our plants healthy, to keep the plant roots healthy, and keep our water system healthy. We don't think about that a lot because it's below the ground. So we're like, oh, look, there's weeds. Oh, look, there's this. Oh, look, there's a problem. Let's dump something on it. And in moderation, that wouldn't be such a big deal, but we're often blanket applying chemicals or spilling things or whatever. And that will impact your birds because it's impacting their food and it's impacting their water. So if you want birds, you have to provide them the things that they want and need to survive. And birds eat insects, including caterpillars and other insects at different stages of their life. Caterpillars are the larval stage of an insect or some insects. Some birds eat flowers or parts of flowers, seeds. Some birds like nectar, like hummingbirds, berries, the nuts from trees, and some birds eat small animals, lizards, toads, or even bigger animals. Owls eat, you know, rats and stuff. And then of course worms and other soil dwelling critters. So how do you get this stuff in your yard? Well, you have to plant it or leave it. And one of the things that really sticks with me is I was out in my yard one day and I had kind of been kicking myself because I hadn't mowed my grass. Yes, I actually have grass in my yard. taking grass out of everybody else's yard, but not mine yet. And there was this bird sitting on the edge of my fence, and it was gently plucking all of the little seeds off from my grass, the bahia, however you say it, the grass. And it sat there for maybe 10 minutes, and I'm like, oh, I wish I had my phone, I could take a video. And it was just eating these little tiny seeds off the grass. And I'm thinking, well, if I had mowed my lawn like I'm, supposed to in the city, this bird would not have had this feast, and I wouldn't have gotten to see how gently it was just plucking, pulling off all these little seeds and eating it. And then I went over to the grass later, and I was like, okay, what's going on here? How is this so tempting to the bird? And these seeds are tiny. The bird was fairly small. I don't remember what kind it was. But how often do we leave the grass? How often do we leave the weed seeds? Maybe in this group, this native plant group, maybe a little bit more than the average person. But Pinellas County has a lot of people, about give or take 1 million people. And we have parks and we have nature and we have lots of spaces for going walking or hiking or whatever. But how much of the land, percentage wise, is actually unmanaged, where the grass seeds can go and be left to be eaten by the birds, or the bidens can go to seed, and the birds will reliably know where to go get their food. So it's up to us to not necessarily let your lawn go or your yard go wild and provide food, but to provide food and do so in ways that are aesthetically pleasing for you and for your neighbors and for code enforcement and all that stuff. So a lot of people give their birds bird feeders, and you put seeds and nuts and whatnot in there, or suet. But a lot of folks don't realize that most baby birds actually eat insects. Especially in the springtime, they eat caterpillars, because the mama bird or the adult bird can shove that food down their baby's throat. In the springtime, we also have our butterfly gardens, and we have, all year the butterflies, but we have a lot more caterpillars in the springtime. And we have more butterflies in the springtime. If you look around you, there's just so many, it's beautiful. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but a lot of folks will take their caterpillars and they will farm them indoors or in containers or whatever, and get really upset if a bird or a critter takes off with one of their butterfly caterpillars. And I know, you want all the butterflies you can get, but when we think about the food that the birds need, they need those too. They need the caterpillars for their babies. And there's not only butterfly caterpillars, there's moth caterpillars and grubs and other smushy type of foods that the birds can feed their babies. But making sure that we're recognizing that all of the wildlife has a stake in the food, because really the birds are, it's just a big food chain. The little animals are eaten by the bigger animals, and then those are eaten by the next level of animals, and the plants are eaten by the animals as well. So I was talking about bidens earlier. The Spanish needle, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, this is what gets all over your pants when you go cut through a parking lot or go hiking. You can see the little white and yellow flowers in the background, but really those seeds are where it's at. The birds like those. So how do you manage these in your yard? A couple tips. So I leave these in my yard, but I don't leave them all over the place. I don't leave them down by the road. The neighbors really don't like that because it gets all over their dog when they're walking their dog. I don't leave them in my lawn, and I don't leave them front and center. I leave them up against the fence in the front yard, and then I leave them up against the fence in the backyard. So as I mow my lawn or as I maintain my gardens or whatever, there's a couple bigger areas with the bidens that I just kind of let go. And then a couple times a year, I will clean it up so it looks better and doesn't get too terribly scraggly or overgrown. but I do manage that. I do manage the weeds. So they're still there and they're still available, but they're not all crazy all over the place. And that way the neighbors can be happy. I'm not getting them all over my pants all the time. And the bees and the butterflies and the birds can still have the important nectar and the seeds and whatnot that they like. Of course, we have the water that birds need, and birds need water every day. So I don't know about you, but at my house here in Clearwater, it has not started raining yet. We have not gotten rain for almost 6 weeks here. And I know that like some of my customers in St. Pete are like, we're flooded. Oh my gosh. Like I'm seeing houses with massive erosion. They're like, what can we do with our landscape to prevent erosion? I'm like, send the rain to me. Send it to my house. I don't have any rain yet. Literally it's sprinkled twice at my house in the last 6 weeks. And I don't have any puddles laying around. My bird bath is maybe the only source of water for these birds outside of the golf course for quite a while, unless other neighbors have bird baths as well, or ponds or something. But a couple words of wisdom about the bird bath. First of all, you have to clean it out on a regular basis because birds can transmit diseases. Sick birds can share their illness with other birds. So not only dump it out, but scrub it out with some natural type of cleaner. I'll use a little baking soda in mine every once in a while and just scrub it out real good at least once a week and empty it out, of course, to prevent mosquitoes. You'll want a small bird bath for small birds and a bigger bird bath for bigger birds. If you have a pond, like a decorative pond for wildlife, you can put little fish in there for mosquito trap to prevent the mosquito larvae from taking over. And then you want to make sure that you have some sort of movement so you don't have just a stagnant, yucky pond or puddle going on there. And then of course, we have mud puddles that form, and they're typically in a moist area of your yard. Maybe you have an area that's not very well draining, or they're in the street where there's maybe a little dip in the road or whatever. So those are the water sources for birds, and we want to make sure the birds are getting nice, clean, healthy water. And so out of all of those, which do you think is probably generally the least healthy and clean? Probably the puddle in the street. And that's the one that is typically left for the birds to find after a rainstorm, unless there's like a drainage ditch or a retention pond or something in your neighborhood. But I know for my house, there's not one for quite a while where there's actual water. I mean, maybe a mile. So I make sure that I provide water for the birds. And I see them use it. I see them drinking. And sometimes I even see them when I turn the hose on, they're like, oh, we know what this means. She's going to switch the bird bath. She's going to put water in there. It's the bees doing that too. Shelter is also important. They need places to hide from predators. They need places to live, and they need places to raise their young. Different birds nest at different heights in different types of trees. Some will, like a woodpecker, for example, will live in a hole in the tree that they create. Some other birds will live in a hole in a tree that they steal or find. And then some birds will build a nest up high in a tree. Some birds will build a nest low in the tree. Some birds might even build a nest really low or on the ground. They hunt for food. They forage for food in different types of trees and shrubs as well. So the shelter that you have in your yard can be something that is kind of a design, like you have intentionally planned it so that birds will find your space appealing. When you are thinking about ways to attract birds to your space, one of in the landscape, one of the most common requests that I get is a hedge. I want a hedge here. I want to block out my neighbors. There's an ugly old fence, or we want to hide the power lines, or whatever you want to hide. A hedge is great to do that. But you can also make it multi-purpose by putting multiple plants of different species, whether you're selecting like 2 or 3 species of plants, or if you're doing, 6 or 8 different species of plants. Your hedge does not have to be all the same plant. I like the taller, kind of slender plants for hedges. This picture here shows elderberry. Although I will say that I did find that picture online on my Canva site. So I did not verify those leaves were perfect to make sure it is elderberry. It came up when I searched. But I like the tall, slender plants. A couple of my favorites for hedges, the stoppers, Simpson stopper, the white stopper, Jamaican caper is one of my favorites for hedges. Privet cassia. So anything that kind of gets tall and slender as opposed to wide and bushy, because then you have to, if it's wide and bushy, possibly maintain it more, hedge it, prune it more. And that's fine if you have the time, energy, or space for that. But if you don't, try to stick to the plants that are taller and more slender naturally. And that list was in no way comprehensive. Those were just a couple off the top of my head that I like. Planting things in layers. In that forest picture that we saw right there, you see there's tall plants, there's mid-level plants, and there's low plants. The birds like that because they can hop in between the layers of the plants, and they can seek shelter. They can fly up, they can fly down, and they're not exposed to predators. They're not exposed to hawks, owls, in the city, cats, coyotes, different things that are not, going to result in a great day for that bird. So they try to hide and seek shelter and cover whenever they can. If you're trying to design your space for birds, making sure that they feel comfortable coming to your space is important. Native plants obviously will provide what native birds are looking for, food and the berries or whatever type of habitat or growth habits they prefer. There's a number of trees and shrubs that are thorny. Birds actually like that. They like to go in and out of the thorny plants, the thorny shrubs and trees and stuff, because they have that added layer of protection. They can go in there and they can hop in between the thorns and stuff, and other animals and people and stuff are less likely to go in there because they don't want to deal with the thorns. You want to plant things in clusters as opposed to one plant here, one plant here, one plant here, and space them far apart. So if you create little thickets or clusters, you've created a little habitat or a little ecosystem right there for the birds to kind of frolic and enjoy and live and feel a little bit more sheltered and a little bit safer in that space. Another thing is snags, dead trees. If you can, if it's not going to be a problem safety-wise or aesthetically, it's not in your front yard, for example, you could leave a dead tree standing up, maybe cut it lower so it's not quite so tall in case it tips over or something so it doesn't crush anything in your yard. Or you could even mimic a snag by burying a natural log or something vertically in the ground. But leaving snags or dead trees in the ground allows insects to go in there and live, and then birds can go and peck at the log, peck at the tree, eat the insects, create homes, and it provides habitat and food for the birds. Because our landscapes are so highly manicured that every dead limb is cut off the oak tree. Every shrub that has a dead branch is pruned off. The grass is kept tidy and neat. The mulch is perfectly smoothed over. The flowers are deadheaded, and all that stuff. It's food for the birds. And we're kind of with our pristine maintenance. Not that everybody does that, of course. I know I don't at my own house as often as I should. But with that pristine maintenance, we are removing a lot of the birds' habitat and things that they need for survival. So if we can let the plants fruit and go to seed, leave those berries, leave the seeds, maybe don't deadhead your flowers as often, or maybe only deadhead the front row, and leave the back row with the old flowers on there, so the birds can go in there and pluck out those little seeds. They'll really thank you. So I have one here from Kim. I have wildflowers in my garden where my bird feeders are. Will the bees from the flowers bother the birds? No, they shouldn't. The bees will go to the flowers, and the birds, if they want the flowers, they'll go to the flowers as well, and maybe they'll eat the bees. But no, in nature, they all live together, the birds and the bees. They live together, you know, in the same fields and the same forests and stuff. So they live together a lot more smoothly and comfortably than we probably do with them. All right, so I wanted to point out one thing that maybe some of you already know about, and if so, I apologize, but this really helps me to explain to folks who are interested in attracting more wildlife to their home. This is really a nice guide to help you kind of follow a checklist or something to get started. So it's a certified wildlife habitat. And you can use this checklist to actually get certified, or just use it as a guide to help you add some new things to your yard to be helpful for wildlife. Basically, the 4 things are, well, 5: food, water, places to raise young, cover, and then sustainable practices. And this is not only for birds, but it's for all wildlife. But, you know, of course, we're talking about birds tonight. So I'll see how we can tailor this checklist a little bit for birds specifically. So this is available online. All you have to do is just go to the National Wildlife Federation's website, and then you can get this this checklist. And I think it's pretty helpful. For food, you need 3 of the following types of plants or feeders. Personally, for me, I don't put feeders in my yard because I want those things to be provided from nature. Because if I have birds that are relying on my bird feeder for food, and then I go on vacation or I run out of bird food or whatever, and this is maybe more of an issue up north in the wintertime, as opposed to here in Florida with the year-round growing and stuff. But I don't want them to be disappointed and then confused about where to get food if I didn't refill something. We want plants that are creating seeds, they're creating berries, they're providing nectar. And as much as possible, we want those seeds and berries and nectar and the fruits and stuff to be native, because the birds who live here expect and depend on native plants for their food source. Water, a bird bath or a lake. If you're lucky enough to live on a lake, that's amazing. You'll probably have a ton of birds because you have a huge water source right there. Most of us, though, don't live on a lake, and you need to provide supplemental water for the birds. And one thing I didn't talk about, and I really wish I had, was a rain garden. If you have a lower area in your yard where rain or water kind of naturally sticks around for a little while longer, that might be a really great spot for a rain garden. And if you have a rain garden, that's a whole new kind of like boggy type of an ecosystem that you can create, this micro ecosystem in the midst of other areas that, you know, around that don't have that. So the more diversity you can get into your plant life and the ecosystems that you have, the more little, remember that phrase, connect the dots, more little dots that we can have for the birds who have different needs and different food sources and things. Different wildlife can benefit from those little micro ecosystems that you create. And then we want to have cover for the birds. One thing I didn't talk about was a roosting box of some sort, you know, like an owl box or a wren house or whatever, the different bird houses and bird boxes that you can get. The one thing that you might want to pay attention to if you choose to get those is some of those have to be hung at a certain height in the yard. So for example, if you hang it and you're like, oh, I've got the perfect spot, I'm going to put it here. Well, if it's not at the right height, the type of bird that it's supposed to attract may not ever move into it. And then you'll be watching it and be disappointed that the birds never, made a home in the house that you provided them, but it might not be at the right height, or it might be facing the wrong direction, might need to be facing west or south, or in the shade. So if you're going to create this house area for the birds, make sure that you're doing it in the way that the birds need. And then another thing that I didn't talk about was a little brush pile of some sort. And it doesn't have to be huge, and it doesn't have to be messy, and it doesn't have to look like a beaver dam or something in the corner of your yard. What I've done in the past for my own brush pile is just my oak tree loses branches, and if I don't use them for kindling for my fire pit in the wintertime, I just make a small pile of them, and I'll break the bigger ones into I don't know, 3 or 4 foot long pieces, and kind of haphazardly pile those in an area that's kind of behind like some shrubs that I have by my fence. And it's amazing how often I see birds hopping around in there. It's not taking up a lot of space. It's not bothering me. It's not an eyesore. I have friends over and they're not like, oh, you have a weird stick collection over there. It's not anything that's like even like prominent, but it is a brush pile. And there's birds over there all the time, pecking and pulling out little bugs and whatever. So that's a really, really easy way to provide additional habitat for those birds. And then places to raise their young. Of course, we want birds to be able to build their nests and have their eggs and whatnot in a nice, safe spot. We talked about some of these sustainable practices down here, the soil and the water conservation. I talked mostly about chemical use, but there's a couple other ways that we can employ these sustainable practices so that we're not using as many resources, and we're saving water, we're saving energy, we're saving reducing chemical use and things like that. That's all I have for tonight. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and I will be happy to answer them.
I have one. If you could pick like 3 beginner plants for someone that doesn't really know where to start with gardening for songbirds, or like the songbird starter kit, if you will, what would be 3 great plants to just get started with?
3 great plants to get started with. So I would pick some sort of a wildflower that made seeds. One of my favorites is goldenrod. It has a ton of seeds. It attracts a crazy amount of pollinators, and I do believe I have seen birds feasting on it. Another one of my favorites are all of the different bunching grasses. Fakahatchee is my personal favorite grass. It's gigantic, and it's a true statement in anybody's landscape, and the birds absolutely love the seed heads. Muley grass is also something I've seen the birds feasting on quite a bit. I think that as far as a shrub goes, my all-time favorite, I know it's not very original, is firebush, just because of the sheer number of different critters that it attracts: birds, butterflies, bees.
We did have another question. What is a good way to provide a nesting habitat or place for birds to have their young?
Providing several shrubs, like bushy plants together, or like a tree with some shrubs under it, to create that thicket or that cluster of plants is really the best way to provide a habitat for nesting, because birds want to feel really safe and really secure in their nest area, and making sure that they have cover from predators, and from predators from below and from above, and at the right height for that species of bird is going to be really important. But having multiple heights of plants available, woody plants, shrubs, and trees together in clusters is going to provide a lot more habitat and space for the animals to nest.
So Amanda, thank you very much for being here. And for everyone else, hopefully you guys learned a lot. And hopefully we will see you guys this weekend and at the next membership meeting. Have a good night, everyone.